A floodplain. Cracked red earth. The air shimmers with heat. Something moves at the edge of the tree line. Low, fast, built like a blade. 1,000 kilometers away, and 30 million years later, a different forest, denser, darker. The ferns hang heavy with moisture. Nothing moves until it does. One built to bleed you out. One built to end you instantly. 2 apex predators. 2 blueprints for killing, separated by deep time. But if they met, which one would survive? Before we go any further, let's be clear about what this video is and what it isn't. This is not a fantasy matchup. We're not picking a winner based on which animal looks more intimidating or which one has better fan art. We're going to treat this the way a paleontologist would, with the fossil evidence we have, with what we understand about the biomechanics of extinct animals, and with modern analogs, living relatives that help us understand how these creatures actually moved, hunted, and fought. Here are the rules. Both animals are healthy adults at their maximum documented size. Neither has a prior injury. We're placing them in a neutral environment. I'll explain the specific terrain shortly, and why that choice matters more than you might think. We are not going to give either animal abilities the fossil record doesn't support, and we're not going to hand you a clean, definitive winner, because that's not how science works, and frankly, it's not how fights work either. What we're going to give you is a probability, a breakdown of what the evidence suggests would most likely happen across multiple scenarios, and why. This is a fight between 2 strategies with very different margins for error. Postosuchus can win instantly, but only if it's right the first time. Gorgonops can be wrong multiple times and still recover. Hold that thought. Now, let's meet the combatants. "260 million years ago, before the dinosaurs, before the first crocodile, before almost anything we would recognize, the Permian world belonged to creatures called synapsids. And among them, few were as dangerous as Gorgonops." Say that name slowly. Gorgonops, named after the Gorgon of Greek myth, Medusa's kin, something that turns you to stone when you look at it. The name fits. Gorgonops shows every trait we associate with active, sustained pursuit predators. Legs tucked partially beneath the body rather than sprawling to the sides, an upright posture that was, at the time, almost revolutionary. Increasingly frontalized eyes, giving it overlapping fields of vision and meaningful depth perception, better than almost anything else alive in its era. But the thing you'd notice first, the thing your eyes would lock onto before anything else, were the teeth. Gorgonops was saber-toothed, not like a lion, which has long canines designed to clamp and suffocate. These teeth were longer, thinner, laterally compressed, designed to slice, to open wounds, to bleed an animal out. It was, in every meaningful sense, a precision killing machine, the blade. Medium-sized for an apex predator, perhaps 70 to 100 kilograms in the largest specimens. Not the heaviest predator of its time, but possibly the most athletically capable. High aerobic capacity, built to sustain a chase. It was the last great predator of its kind, the final flourishing of a lineage that had ruled for millions of years. And then the world ended. The Permian Triassic extinction, the worst mass extinction in Earth's history, wiped out over 90% of all species. Gorgonops and everything like it was gone. But life doesn't stay empty for long. Into the recovering Triassic world, a new kind of predator rose, Postosuchus, roughly 230 million years ago. A creature that looks, at first glance, like a dinosaur, but isn't. It belongs to a different branch of the archosaur family tree entirely. The crocodile line, not the bird line. Think about what that means. Modern crocodiles are the survivors of this lineage. Postosuchus is what happens when you take that ancient crocodilian heritage and build it upright. 4 legs tucked beneath the body, a tall, heavy silhouette, a skull the size of a suitcase. And that skull, that is the story. Its bite force, estimated in biomechanical models, would have been extraordinary. Multiple times that of a spotted hyena, which is already famous for cracking bone. Postosuchus could have bitten through the femur of a medium-sized herbivore without slowing down. Its teeth weren't designed for slicing. They were serrated, blade-edged, built for gripping and tearing, for holding struggling prey still while the jaws did their work. Its neck muscles were immense, anchored to a skull built like a battering ram. And those neck muscles served a specific purpose. Like modern crocodilians, Postosuchus could close its jaws on a target and wrench. A violent lateral rotation using its entire body mass. Against a smaller animal, this wouldn't just tear flesh, it would shatter bone, humerus, femur, spine. One more thing about Postosuchus that often gets overlooked. Its crocodilian heritage gave it sensory tools tuned specifically for ambush. Motion sensitivity in low-light conditions. Olfactory acuity comparable to its modern descendants. It didn't need to see you coming. It could smell you before you knew it was there. Postosuchus was not a pursuit predator. It was an ambush specialist. A sprinter, not a marathoner. Lie in wait. Explode forward. End it. After those first few seconds, though, the math changes. 2 predators, 30 million years apart. The blade and the hammer. One built for endurance and precision. One built for power and the first strike. Now let's talk about where they meet. Before the next segment continues, a warning. Something colossal is about to break the surface. A predator longer than T-Rex, engineered for 2 worlds, erased in a single night of fire, and dragged back into reality by a single bone pulled from the Moroccan sands. The upcoming video unleashes Spinosaurus, not as a dinosaur, but as a force built to dominate a river system where even the fish were killers. Be there when the next piece of the puzzle surfaces by hitting subscribe. Environment isn't background. In a real predator encounter, terrain is often the deciding factor. It determines who has cover, who has room to maneuver, who can use their strengths, and who is exposed. We considered 3 options. A dry, open floodplain, cracked earth, sparse vegetation, long sightlines. This rewards endurance and aerobic capacity, the kind of terrain where a pursuit predator thrives and an ambush specialist struggles. Most encounters here tilt heavily toward Gorgonops. A dense forest interior, heavy canopy, undergrowth, limited visibility. This rewards concealment and the first strike. Ambush country, Postosuchus's ideal world. And a forest edge, the transition zone between open ground and dense cover. Mixed terrain. Neither predator has a clean advantage. Sightlines are partial. There's room to run, but also cover to hide in. For this video, we're using the forest edge. Here's why. The pure floodplain and the pure forest both produce lopsided results. Scientifically valid, but analytically thin. The forest edge is where both animals would plausibly encounter each other. where their behavioral strategies come into direct conflict and where we get the most nuanced, honest breakdown of what the evidence tells us. Now, the weapons. Let's look at each animal's toolkit, not as a list of scary features, but as a system. Because every weapon only makes sense in the context of the body it's attached to. The saber teeth of Gorgonops are not the largest fangs in prehistoric history, but they may be among the most purposefully designed, laterally compressed, flat rather than round in cross-section. This shape reduces drag on the entry stroke, letting the teeth penetrate quickly and deeply. The edges are sharp, not serrated, optimized for slicing rather than holding. The jaw itself is the key. Gorgonops could open its mouth to an extreme gape angle, wider than most predators of its era. This wasn't for swallowing prey whole. It was to clear the saber teeth from the target, to allow a full, committed downward strike that would open a deep wound and then withdraw cleanly. The skull was relatively lightweight for an apex predator. Thin bone structure, not built to absorb repeated impact. This is significant. It tells us that Gorgonops was not a biter that clung and locked on. It was a striker. Hit and step back, slash and wait. The forelimbs were muscular and built for grappling, for pulling prey toward the body, stabilizing a target while the jaws did their work. Not crushing forelimbs, positioning forelimbs. And then there's what you can't see in the skeleton, but can infer from its physiology: stamina. Gorgonops could sustain effort, could chase, withdraw, circle, feint, and re-engage without the same metabolic cost that would cripple an animal running on burst power alone. The weakness. Everything that makes the saber effective requires control. Gorgonops needs to choose its moment, control the geometry of the strike, and stay out of range in between. If it gets grabbed, if that 300-kilogram predator closes its jaws on an 80-kilogram frame, the physics end the fight immediately. Gorgonops doesn't win by overpowering. It wins by never letting Postosuchus close that gap. Where Gorgonops is a blade, Postosuchus is a hammer. The skull is deep and reinforced, built to absorb impact, to resist the twisting forces of struggling prey. The teeth grip, they interlock, they hold. Once Postosuchus closed its jaws on something, the geometry of the bite made release almost impossible without active muscular effort. The neck musculature was extraordinary. The attachment points on the skull and vertebrae suggest muscles capable of violent lateral wrenching, the death roll. The same motion modern crocodilians use to tear pieces from large prey. Here's what that means in practice. If Postosuchus lands a limb grip, it doesn't just bite. It uses its entire body mass to rotate. Against the lighter frame of Gorgonops, this wouldn't just tear flesh. It would shatter the humerus or femur entirely. A living Nile crocodile delivers this with perhaps half the mass of Postosuchus on land from an upright stance with a bite point at head height rather than water level. The comparison gives you some sense of the force we're discussing. The critical vulnerability of this system: recovery time. After a committed charge, a full burst of speed, a lunge, a bite, Postosuchus had spent its reserves. Without the sustained aerobic capacity of an endothermic predator, it needed to land a decisive blow quickly. A missed ambush wasn't just a missed meal, it was a window of vulnerability. One built for the long game. One built to end it before the long game begins. So who strikes first? That question isn't just about speed, it's about information. Which animal knows more sooner and can act on it faster? The increasingly frontalized eyes of Gorgonops gave it overlapping fields of vision, meaningful depth perception in an open or semi-open environment. A Gorgonops could judge distance accurately enough to time an approach, gauge when it was within striking range, assess the movement patterns of a rival. Its higher metabolic rate meant it was almost certainly active across a wider range of temperatures and times of day than an ectothermic rival. It didn't need to warm up. A Gorgonops could hunt at dawn, at dusk, in the cooler hours that would leave cold-blooded animals sluggish and slow. And it could sustain that hunt. A pursuit that exhausted Postosuchus in 40 seconds might barely register for Gorgonops. The hunting strategy, inferred from anatomy and modern analogues among active pursuit predators, was likely find the prey, close the distance carefully, commit to the strike. If the first strike wasn't decisive, maintain contact, circle, strike again. Every engagement on Gorgonops' terms is a war of attrition. It's designed to win. Postosuchus inherited sensory architecture from its crocodilian ancestors, and that heritage is formidable in the right conditions. Modern crocodilians are ambush predators of exceptional patience. They remain motionless for hours, processing environmental information, vibration, scent, motion, without triggering prey awareness. Postosuchus, partially concealed in forest edge undergrowth, would have had comparable stillness, the ability to wait, the ability to detect approach before the approaching animal detected it. For the first 2 or 3 seconds of a charge, Postosuchus may have been among the fastest animals in its ecosystem. Crocodile line archosaurs from this period show skeletal evidence of upright, rapid locomotion, not the sprawling lunge of a modern croc, but an explosive, upright sprint. But those 2 or 3 seconds are the entire window. After that, the metabolic cost rises sharply. The burst power that makes an ambush devastating is also what makes a failed ambush catastrophic. A Postosuchus that missed, or that struck but didn't disable, was now facing a warm-blooded animal that could sustain pressure indefinitely. So here is the central tension. Gorgonops wants information, wants distance, wants to choose its moment. Postosuchus wants to erase all of that, wants the encounter to begin and end in the same heartbeat. Who controls the terms of the engagement? That depends entirely on the terrain. 3 scenarios, 3 versions of this fight. Watch what changes and what doesn't. Early morning. The temperature is cool, suboptimal for an animal relying on burst metabolism, neutral for one running on sustained aerobic output. It's worth noting, Postosuchus, as a crocodile line archosaur, likely had a higher metabolic rate than a modern crocodile. It wasn't fully cold-blooded in the way we sometimes imagine. But the gap between its sustained aerobic output and that of Gorgonops, a likely endotherm, was still significant. In a cool morning, that gap widens. Gorgonops has detected Postosuchus at roughly 40 meters. The Postosuchus is stationary, possibly thermoregulating in a patch of early sunlight. Gorgonops has every information advantage here. It can judge the distance clearly. It can read posture, whether the rival is alert or torpid. It can choose its approach angle without committing. A warm-blooded predator in this position moves slowly, deliberately, minimizing movement, closing the gap to where its speed advantage becomes decisive. Now, the Postosuchus becomes aware. Its options in open ground are limited. It can charge, commit its burst sprint directly at the threat, or it can hold position and bluff, standing its full height, maximizing its visual mass. If Postosuchus charges, it commits to a burst it can only sustain briefly. If Gorgonops sidesteps, and with its depth perception, that sidestep is calibrated, not panicked, Postosuchus has spent its burst and is now facing a fresh, warm-blooded predator at close range. Gorgonops doesn't rush. It circles, tests, a step in, a step out. Every time Postosuchus reacts, it pays for it. The saber strikes, lateral slashes, deep cuts don't need to kill immediately. They need to bleed, to weaken, to slow. And every charge Postosuchus attempts is another withdrawal from a metabolic account that is not being replenished. In open terrain, with the metabolic imbalance working against it, Postosuchus is fighting the wrong kind of war. Likely outcome? Gorgonops wins via sustained pressure, repeated saber strikes, eventual incapacitation. Probably not a fast kill, but an inevitable one. But that's only one world. Change the terrain, and the entire fight flips. Different world. Light comes in broken shafts. Visibility at ground level drops to 5 or 10 meters in some directions. The undergrowth is heavy enough that a large, stationary animal is essentially invisible. Postosuchus has been motionless for a long time. Stationary means invisible here. A large predator against a background of shadow and vegetation. Its crocodilian heritage stillness, making it indistinguishable from the forest itself, registers as nothing. Gorgonops moves along a game trail. Its depth perception is less useful here. The angles are compressed, the background too cluttered for reliable distance reading. Postosuchus waits. The burst comes without warning. At 3 meters, a 300-kilogram predator moving at full sprint is not something you outrun or outmaneuver in that fraction of a second. The geometry doesn't permit it. If the initial strike connects with the neck, the shoulder, the flank, and at 3 meters, an ambush predator's lunge is highly accurate. The result on Gorgonops' 80-kilogram frame is decisive. Remember the weight class, 4-1. If Postosuchus closes those jaws and rolls, that death roll motion using its full body mass, it doesn't just wound Gorgonops, it breaks it. Humerus, femur, cervical vertebrae. Gorgonops' saber teeth require a controlled strike from above. On the ground, pinned, that geometry is impossible. The weapon is neutralized by the position. A single successful ambush here ends the encounter before Gorgonops' advantages can come into play. Likely outcome? Postosuchus wins decisively on the first strike. The fight is measured in seconds, not minutes. And now, the most honest scenario, the one neither predator would choose. Both animals are aware of each other. Perhaps they caught scent first. Perhaps movement at the tree line. Gorgonops in the open, Postosuchus partially visible, created mutual detection before either could initiate on their own terms. This is a standoff. And standoffs are where behavioral calculus matters as much as raw weaponry. Gorgonops, in the open, has the sensory advantage. It can track the larger animal's position. It can assess whether there's room behind that tree line for a charge. It wants distance, wants to probe, wants to find an angle that doesn't expose it to a head-on lunge. Postosuchus, partially covered, wants exactly the opposite. It wants Gorgonops to approach, wants to compress that distance into the 3-meter window where it becomes unstoppable. What happens next is genuinely unpredictable. And that unpredictability is the honest answer. If Gorgonops stays patient, holds range, uses its visual advantage, waits for Postosuchus to commit to a charge in unfavorable conditions, it may land its own strike at a moment when Postosuchus is extended and off balance. If Postosuchus can shift without being tracked, a change in wind, a moment of divided attention, it can close to ambush range. And we're back to scenario 2. A direct clash, both committing simultaneously. Gorgonops strikes first. The saber cuts land, deep, serious wounds, but not instantly disabling. Postosuchus, even bleeding, retains its jaw force and its 300-kilogram mass. A counterbite comes. It only needs to land once. Postosuchus strikes first. The lunge may not achieve the clean grip of a prepared ambush. Gorgonops has its depth perception. It may partially evade, turn the impact. But even a glancing blow from that skull at full charge can fracture bone. This scenario ends with whoever was fractionally more fortunate in the opening exchange. Likely outcome: slight edge to Postosuchus if it initiates contact. Slight edge to Gorgonops if it maintains range. The result is determined by a single moment neither animal can fully control. So, the question you came for: if these two animals met across a wide range of conditions, the way a scientist would run a repeated simulation, what does the evidence suggest? This isn't just a fight between animals. It's a fight between solutions. And those solutions have very different error tolerances. Postosuchus can win instantly, but only if it's right the first time. Gorgonops can be wrong multiple times and still recover. That asymmetry is the whole story. Postosuchus wins approximately 60 to 65% of encounters. Postosuchus only needs one thing to go right: one successful lunge, one clean bite. Its offensive capability is so concentrated, so catastrophic in a single application, that it doesn't need sustained engagement. It needs a moment. And in most terrain configurations, finding that moment is achievable. Gorgonops wins approximately 35 to 40% of encounters, primarily in open terrain, in extended engagements, in scenarios where its endurance and aerobic superiority can be fully expressed without the encounter collapsing into a single decisive contact. The weight class matters here, and it's worth being direct about it. Gorgonops at 80 kilograms is punching well above its weight class against a 300-kilogram rival. That 4-to-1 mass ratio is, in the natural world, usually decisive. The only reason Gorgonops wins any significant percentage is that its entire strategy is built around never letting that mass ratio become physically relevant, never being grabbed, never being pinned, never letting the fight become a test of raw power.
What is remarkable, and this is the thing worth sitting with, is that both animals represent complete answers to the same question. How do you become the apex predator of your world? Gorgonops said, be precise, be patient, be able to hunt when others can't. Make every encounter a long game you're built to win. Postosuchus said, be so devastating in a single moment that the long game never happens. Both answers worked. For millions of years, each of these animals was the most dangerous creature in its ecosystem. But in a direct encounter, across most conditions, the answer that needed only one moment wins more often than the answer that needed many.
There's something quietly tragic about both of these animals. Gorgonops was the last of its kind in the most specific sense. It was among the final expression of the synapsid predators, the lineage that hundreds of millions of years earlier had been the dominant animals on Earth. By the Late Permian, Gorgonops and its relatives were the rulers of a world they had inherited through vast stretches of evolutionary time. Then the extinction came, and everything like Gorgonops, every saber-toothed synapsid, every warm-blooded predator of that design was gone. Postosuchus, for its part, was the apex of a different dynasty. The Rawasuchians, large, upright, crocodile-line archosaurs, were dominant predators of the Triassic world. They filled the role that dinosaurs would later claim. For tens of millions of years, they were the heavyweights. And then, they too were gone. The end Triassic extinction, another cataclysm, another reset, eliminated the Rawasuchians almost entirely. The ecological space they vacated was filled by the dinosaurs they had been suppressing. What replaced Gorgonops? Eventually, us. Our lineage, the mammals, descends from the synapsids. We carry in our jawbones, literally, 3 small bones in the middle ear, the evolutionary echo of what Gorgonops left behind. You are, in a very specific anatomical sense, the descendant of the blade. What replaced Postosuchus? Crocodiles. Still here. Still using the same basic ambush architecture. The same bone-crushing grip after 200 million years. The hammer never stopped working. Every breath you take, every step you walk, all of it built on evolutionary experiments that creatures like these pioneered. The upright posture, the sustained pursuit, the ambush from stillness. These aren't just prehistoric footnotes. They are the foundation of how predation works on this planet, carried forward in every animal alive today. 2 blueprints for killing, both wiped out by forces that had nothing to do with fighting ability. And yet, the designs survived, rebuilt, refined, reinvented by whatever came next. Because that is what evolution does. It doesn't preserve animals, it preserves solutions. And when a solution is good enough, when the math of predation works, it finds a way back into the world, wearing a new body with a new name. The blade and the hammer, the marathon and the ambush. They were here before, and they never really left. Predators rise. Predators fall. But some were never meant to stay buried. Beneath ancient water, something older waits, built for pressure, for violence. For a world where even the river was a battlefield, erased in fire, reborn from a fragment, a shape too strange to belong to land or sea. The next chapter goes deeper than any apex should follow.